My name is Alain Sylvain. I'm the CEO of Sylvain, a strategy and design consultancy. And I'm here to talk about post-purpose. What happens when companies go beyond purpose and discover the power of obsession? Just by way of introduction, like I said, my company is a little strategy and design consultancy. We help companies think about the future of their products and their brands. We're a certified B Corporation. We've been around for 11 years. We work with a lot of companies in different categories. Check us out at sylvain.co, work in technology and finance, sports, and so on. But really, let's get started. Let's talk about why we're here and really get to the heart of this idea of purpose. The world of business in general is just drunk with this notion of purpose. Like, if there's such thing as business pop culture, everything that people have talked about has been about purpose recently. And sometimes purpose is talked about as corporate social responsibility, or talked about as social impact. But really, the meaning of purpose is really about the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. The idea that a company is in service of a reason to exist that's greater than just revenue or just profits. And no better example exists than Patagonia. It's sort of the poster child for all things related to purpose. You know, people roll their eyes, you bring up Patagonia, they're like, yeah, I get it. And they're in business to save the planet. Yeah, they're privately owned, for-profit organization, but yet has this really ambitious social agenda tied to the environment. And going so far as to even tell people not to buy their products in advertising. This is a famous ad and advertising campaign they did in 2011 where they literally said, don't buy this jacket. And over the course of Patagonia's growth, and especially over the last 10 years where they've really doubled down on this idea of social purpose or purpose in general, success has kind of shot through the roof. They're now over $1 billion company and the biggest certified B Corporation in the world. Not only from a financial point of view are they highly successful from a labor point of view, they're also very successful. They have a 4% employee turnover rate compared to the average US rate of 12 to 15% annually and 10.9% globally. Their retention rate among working moms is at 100%, which is just kind of unbelievable. Clearly, their purpose is potent. And as a result of the examples like that, there's this idea and this kind of thing in culture and business pop culture now around purpose. You know, got purpose? Do you have purpose? Everyone has noticed Patagonia's purpose-driven success, and we've all become obsessed with it. As a result, a lot of companies have stepped up and taken the high road. You see Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan and Larry Fink at BlackRock with the Business Roundtable, really underlying the importance of having a reason to exist beyond profits alone. And of course, the emergence of certified B corporations, of which Sylvain is one. That too is an example. There were 1,500 certified B Corps when we applied for it in 2016, and now there are almost 4,000. And as a result of all this energy around purpose, there's something that we'd like to call the purpose industrial complex, a strategic relationship between companies, consultancies, nonprofits, and governments that builds appealing and profitable commercial brands through culturally relevant media narratives. There is sort of like a hype around purpose where maybe the notion of purpose and the allure of purpose is greater than what the idea itself is. And there's sort of a conspiracy among companies and media to build these really aspirational, lofty stories around companies. And there's tons to look at. There are books and there are articles, and I don't need to tell you all the things that are popped up around why purpose is important. And it's beyond that. If you go to LinkedIn and you search Chief Purpose Officer on LinkedIn, you're going to get 650,000 results. 650,000 Chief Purpose Officers? Like, what is that? Of course, Clubhouse, a place where people have these intimate one-on-one or group conversations. There are 83 clubs that are tied to purpose. You don't search purpose in Amazon books. You're going to see tons of books related to business purpose, but also self-help purpose, which is really where this idea came from, and no better icon exists than Tony Robbins. If you can't, you must. If you must, you can. And that's sort of the earnest approach to reason to exist that has entered the business world. And you've got these like talking heads that are on stage pounding their chests saying to companies, do you have purpose? Do you have a reason to exist? And I am too complicit in this. I do this. I've done it many, many times. I've been on stage many times talking to companies about why purpose is important, how it's important to go beyond, to embrace a purpose. And there's good business case for that. 70% of Gen Z and millennials believe a brand should have a purpose they personally believe in. It's considered, at this point, business 101. It's considered good business, and that's the result. That's the reason we saw in 2020 so many companies try to step up in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the killing of George Floyd, and all the other crises we saw in 2020 we've seen since. You're seeing companies play a little bit more of an active role. And a great example of that is Blackout Tuesday. If you remember, a few days or weeks after the killing of George Floyd, companies, stopped talking about their sales and stopped talking about certain features of their product and took a moment to put up this black square. Users and companies did that. And it was this kind of profound moment where companies did it everywhere. And what was interesting to me is just a day later, a couple days later, they went back to promoting some of their own features or talking about their own brand. For that brief moment, they put a purpose sort of out there. Did it diminish the purpose when it kind of disappeared afterwards and they haven't done it yet? Does it diminish the importance of it? And there's kind of a trope, it's kind of a joke among brand marketing people how there's a language and a way to promote these brands in the midst of these crises. There's this great fake manifesto that was created. We at Brand are committed to fighting injustice by posting images to Twitter that express our commitment to fighting injustice. To that end, we offer this solemn white on black JPEG that expresses vague solidarity with the Black community, but will quietly elide the specifics of what is wrong, what needs to change, or in what ways we'll do anything about it. There was this really passive it was actually passive. All this activity that happened in 2020 when it comes to activities that were greater than revenue were actually very passive and some might say meaningless. And consumers see that, consumers believe that. 53% of consumers think brands trust wash or aren't as committed to helping society as they claim. That's half. It's a significant portion. And Nike got so much attention for the support of Colin Kaepernick maybe 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. 60% of survey participants felt positively about Nike after viewing the ad. But of that group, only 45% thought Nike was genuinely committed to racial justice. Again, about half of the people have a sense of skepticism about why these companies are doing these things. Now, don't get me wrong, purpose still matters. Purpose, of course, is important, but the problem is that it's become a bit of a rhetorical exercise. McKinsey did this studies where they found that 82% of people felt it was important for their companies to have a purpose, but only 42% felt their company's purpose statement had any impact. Again, about half. There's an underlying truth about half of people are suspect about whether companies really live out their purpose. They believe it's important, but do they actually execute on it? 94% of consumers believe the companies they engage with should have a strong purpose. 83% of consumers said companies should only earn a profit if they also deliver a positive impact. Purpose is a given. Having a purpose is just fundamental. To me, this is just about showing up in 2021 as a corporation. You need to have a purpose. You need to have a reason to exist. That part, it's easy. And it's time to stop our collective obsession with purpose and actually obsess about obsession. We need to be obsessed about the purpose itself. And there's no greater example of that than Roger Bannister, who, of course, committed to the 4-minute mile. And it wasn't only to finish the mile, to finish the race. It was actually to achieve something. And with this ruthless obsession, he trained and studied to get under those 4 minutes. Enough about purpose. Yes, enough. We get there's a reason to exist beyond the company and beyond the profits. But what about the obsession for that purpose? Obsession sometimes gets, you kind of misconstrue it and it's, viewed as a little crazy and the portrayal in pop culture is a little wacky or a little insane or OCD or perfectionist or, germophobia. As a kid, it's kind of cute to be obsessed, but when you're older, it's kind of weird and bizarre. But actually, there's actually a virtue to obsession. And if you look at this great quote in Psychology Today, when you obsess, you learn how to extinguish distractions so that you can concentrate. You accept the hard existential fact that if you intend to matter, you must act as if you matter. You retrain your brain, asking it to halt its pursuit of fluff and worry, to instead embrace its own potential. That's the power of obsession. And think about, I'm going to read the quote again, but think about it this time through the eyes of a corporation, okay? When you obsess, you learn how to extinguish distractions so that you can concentrate. You accept the hard existential fact that if you intend to matter, you must act as if you matter. You retrain your organization, asking it to halt its pursuit of fluff and worry, to instead embrace its own potential. Could you imagine if companies were obsessed with their purpose in the way that great inventors and great stories of mankind showed the virtues of obsession. Thomas Edison and the light bulb, the ambition of the moonshot, or the decoding of the human genome. That all came from an intense obsession on a purpose. So purpose alone doesn't seem to be it for me. To me, it falls short. To me, it's about purposeful obsession, an idea or thought that ruthlessly preoccupies the mind in service of a grand vision or ambitious goal. It's one thing to be purposed, it's another thing to be obsessed about that purpose. Which brings me back to Patagonia. And the reason people love Patagonia is actually wrong. It's not about the purpose. What actually makes them interesting is their obsession with that purpose. That's the reason Patagonia is an incredible example that we should point to. My company's actually worked with Patagonia, and it was amazing. We had people in the office, and there was a swell in the Pacific Ocean, a surge of waves, and there's a policy there that when the surf comes up, you drop work and you go surfing. He famously said, I don't care when you work as long as the job gets done. If there's surfing conditions, you surf. That's crazy. Let's call that obsession. Is very intense. And he also famously said, I drive old cars. All my Patagonia clothes are years and years old. I hardly have anything new. I try to lead a very simple life. I'm not a consumer of anything, and I much prefer sleeping on somebody's floor than in a motel room. And we know this firsthand. When we worked with them, we had to share rooms and fly economy and all these things that you don't see in the world of business. And that's because of Patagonia's obsession with their purpose. Not because of their purpose, but because of the obsession with their purpose. Or how about their tags where they famously said, vote the assholes out around election time in 2020? Or the fact that they boldly said that the president stole your land and took the $10 million in tax cuts and gave them to environmental charities. That's a level of obsession that's so great. The purpose is perhaps a guiding light, but the obsession pushes you to the limits of how to assert that. They imposed an earth tax on themselves starting in 1985 for a 1% for the planet. These are not small things. This is not purpose. This is conviction. This is obsession. So how do you ignite your purposeful obsession? How do you find that in the work that you do every day? And I'm going to give you 5 pathways to think about. 5 pathways to purposeful obsession. The first, insatiable curiosity. Think about master builders, Lego master builders that look at everything around them and think about how they can create them using Legos. They're fiercely curious. Or Google and all the experiments that they put to work to really asking coders to submit ideas, to develop new ideas, constantly flexing their curiosity. Number 2, unwavering belief. Chanel famously, this luxury French fashion house, they have such a commitment to femininity and what they stand for that they will never, ever sell products online. It's a luxury experience that needs to be experienced in person. And they have an unwavering belief in the store experience and femininity that they'll never, ever change. That's like a seriously unwavering belief. Or how about Sun Ra, the story of Sun Ra, who the artist who claimed that he was sent to Earth from outer space to save humanity and bring harmony to the world. He had such a clear conviction about why he was here, and the music he made was a manifestation of that. Unwavering belief is a key part of obsession. Audacious vision. You can see the big picture and the incremental steps to get there. You really are bold enough to put something out there, a vision that's greater than you. Tesla famously has their master plan with intense clarity about why they exist and what they're doing. Build a sports car. Use that money to build an affordable car. Use that money to build an even more affordable car while doing the above, also provide zero-emission electric power generation options. That is an audacious vision, which is key part to obsession. And it goes, there are the Elon Musks and then the Larry Finks, who too, through his annual letter, made a bold commitment to long-term purpose, strategy, climate change. Then there's the next one, immersive flow. When you fall into a flow state where you can be singularly focused on one thing and you apply your brain to that, incredible things can happen. Bill Gates, there's this great story where every year when he was CEO, he would take a week, and he called it Think Week, where he would go off in a cabin and read the memos and pitches of his team around new innovations and new ideas. And that week manifested is where Xbox came from. It's where Internet Explorer came from. This intense idea of being singularly focused on something and being in a moment of flow is truly a trait tied to obsession. Or how about this profound quote? Distraction is the enemy of vision. It's pretty powerful. You'd think it was a great philosopher. It was a different sort of philosopher. It was Kanye who said it. Distraction is the enemy of vision. Distraction is the enemy of vision. Last is contagious energy. The idea that this is something you believe in so much that you need to share it. You have to share it. It has to be spread. And of course, Clubhouse is one of these things over recent months that emerged in culture and in business pop culture, where it's just something that you feel like it's a community that you have to share and be a part of. You see that with the stands and the K-pop, the BTS army, like this idea of the stand culture where you stand alongside like-minded people in pursuit of one shared obsession. At best, when your purpose and your obsession are disjointed, your vision can be a house of cards. At worst, it can get perverted. And a great example of this is WeWork, how their purpose seemed to be about giving people the room and the ability to live their full lives, but their obsession was not aligned with that. The obsession, perhaps, was more about real estate and was more about growth. And that, of course, had a result. Or you think about the other side. When purpose and obsession is aligned, when they're aligned, they empower you to shape the future by sheer will. And a great example of that is Impossible Foods, that are so obsessed with basically making meat redundant, that they've studied beef at a molecular level. They've employed science in ways that you've never seen in this space in order to truly create a plant-based alternative. That is an obsession, a ruthless obsession that's tied to purpose. So how will you free your own purposeful obsession? Here's some questions to think about. I'll close with 5 questions tied to those pathways. Insatiable curiosity. What do you never tire of learning about? Unwavering belief. What are you willing to stand for alone? Audacious vision. What is the bold future that you aspire to realize? Immersive flow. What one thing brings you unrivaled focus? Contagious energy. What are you doing to inspire others to get behind you? Insatiable curiosity, unwavering belief, audacious vision, immersive flow, and contagious energy. Thank you for your time. Check us out at sylvain.co. And my name is Alain, CEO of Sylvain, and we'll see you again.
Alain, hi, it's good to see you.
Hey, good to see you, Kiley.
So that was really great. I was just looking at the event chat, and I can tell that it's really this idea of purposeful obsession is really resonating with people, which is something I'm sure you hear a lot when you give this presentation. I did want to take a minute to sort of tie it back to a few things that we've heard earlier today, and something that I feel like is going to come up later today. There's a lot of talk about sort of how to, what companies should be doing to attract Gen Z talent, right? And I think that you really have your finger on the pulse with this question. So it's a little bit 2 parts. One is, do you think the pandemic and this sort of moment in time has given companies sort of a unique moment to sort of think differently about their purpose and maybe lean more towards obsession? And also, well, let's start there, and then I'll ask the other part. So, do you think we're in a unique moment in time for companies to sort of rethink how they're approaching their purpose?
Yes, I think so. And I think it's got 2 sides. I think there is a unique moment in time where companies now have a inspiring permission to kind of assert a reason to exist beyond their revenue. But at the same time, there's also this kind of perverted window of opportunity around trends, where companies are leaning into it. And companies that in the past you would think had no right to have a reason to exist, to assert a reason to exist, are kind of taking advantage of that. Really seeing that it's in the zeitgeist. So yes, I think 2020 brought that opportunity, but not entirely, for good.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, I get it. I totally agree with you. I think there's some, I think we can both agree there's some fairly cynical marketing out there that is, your example of the black squares, I think, was sort of captured that in a real way. It's a way to signal, it's virtue signaling with no real intent. And you and I were talking the other day, and this leads me to sort of the next part of this question is, being of a certain age, I feel like cynicism is sort of like baked into my core. But your attitude is that Gen Z specifically Gen Z millennials, but Gen Z specifically, have quite a bit of optimism, and that maybe that they're seeing beyond sort of the cynical marketing ploys and actually looking for the real thing. Do you think that Gen Z is a more optimistic generation, and that these messages are resounding more specifically with them?
Absolutely, but not in the way that you might think. And optimism, I think, is the right word. But optimism also suggests some sort of naivete at the same time. What makes that generation very different than ours, if I can say that, Kiley, we are the cynical older people, is that the Gen Z, they really believe these companies are tools to achieve the ambition that the people themselves want. They don't view companies as a distant, aspirational sort of idea. They understand marketing. They understand what these purpose statements mean. They understand how much it costs to get on the Super Bowl. They understand what an influencer is. And so for them, they're not really victims or consumers of marketing. It's kind of the other way around. They really view companies as tools. And so companies are now subservient to Gen Z versus generations like us. We looked up to these big companies. And we were looking for guidance from the big companies. I think big companies are now looking for guidance from Gen Z. And at the company, we talk a lot about how a lot of people are trying to hack Gen Z. Like, can we hack them? Can we figure them out? When in reality, I think young people are hacking companies to achieve their own end.
No, I totally agree. I think part of that is maybe why there's less cynicism. My theory is that, growing up in the 80s and 90s, like we did, I think there was a lot more brand worship because we didn't have the interaction with those brands that people have now. Right. And I think there's a way to sort of hold brands to account that we didn't necessarily have, right? And so maybe that sort of offsets the cynical part of that. We do have a question from the audience. Let me see if I can read that. So the question from the audience is, do you feel disruptive technologies like AI, machine learning, and 5G can help level the playing field and add to the diverse and inclusive nature of the human experience, and why? So I guess in context of purpose and obsession, what do you feel like how do you feel companies can use these emerging technologies in like good and powerful ways? Beyond sort of Patagonia's beautiful photographs and mantras, right. Like how can other companies use those technologies?
Well, a key, remember, the way I look at it is like there's purpose and there's obsession and then there's purposeful obsession. And a key driver to be obsessed about anything, especially anything involving humans, is empathy. And I think these technologies are actually empathy machines. If you ask me, if 5G is available to everybody, and mobile technology is where it is, and AI can bring hyper-relevant experiences to each person, then you're gaining a whole new intimacy with mankind, if I can use that term, humankind, that really allows for obsession to happen. But I don't think that alone is it. I don't think AI, machine learning, and these kind of leaps in technology alone. I think it is a lot about the kind of the emotional tenor that we're in, which gets back to that Gen Z point. That drives most of it. Technology is changing everything. Of course, it's disrupting everything, accelerating maybe everything. But I wouldn't say that in itself is that kind of bridge to purposeful obsession.
Right. I totally agree with that. And I think also, it's something that Kathy Bassant's going to talk about later. Kathy Bassant from Bank of America about, the technologies are only as good as the people that are creating them, right? The codes are only as reliable as the diverse teams that are building them, right? And it's speaking of perversion, like it is easy to pervert AI machine learning based on who's writing that code.
If I can,
you brought up BTS. Go ahead.
One quick thing, and maybe something to ask her later, something to think about later, is this. Just this reminder that technology is made by humans, as like you said, and oftentimes we believe we're subservient to technology, that somehow we should follow what technology, because big data or machine learning or AI is saying it's the future, we sort of are changing our life to adapt to that, when in reality, these are tools that are byproducts of our life. So this kind of power dynamic, I think, is an interesting thing to explore with her, is like, where is the hierarchy? What is technology in service of people, or in people in service of technology,